Under the twin suns of the outpost world, the market was alive with noise and movement. Merchants shouted over one another. Alien species bartered for weapons, food, and trinkets. And in the center of it all, a stage was raised high above the crowd, where the darkest trade of all took place, the sale of living beings. Humans were rare in such places, but not unheard of. Travelers, explorers, and mercenaries sometimes passed through, keeping their hoods low to avoid unwanted attention on this day. A lone human stood watching the stage. His name, whispered among traders, was Marcus, a man known for his stubbornness and strange habit of walking where no sane traveler dared to go. The crowd quieted as guards dragged a figure forward onto the platform. She was tall and slender. Her skin a pale silver that shimmered faintly under the suns. Her hair was dark and tangled, falling across her shoulders in waves, her wrists and ankles bound with heavy iron. Her eyes were what caught Marcus more than her beauty. They were fierce, burning with pride. Even in chains, the auctioneer announced her as property to be sold. An escaped fugitive of noble blood, captured and broken. The highest bidder would gain not only a servant, but a symbol of power. The crowd erupted with offers, the bids rising fast. Marcus had no reason to be there, no reason to care, and yet something in him moved before he could stop himself. He stepped forward, raising his voice with a bid that silenced even the loudest merchant. The auctioneer blinked in surprise, but the rules of trade were clear. The credits Marcus offered were more than enough, and no one dared to challenge the mad human when the chains were unlocked and the alien woman pushed into his custody. She did not fall at his feet in gratitude. She did not weep or thank him. Instead, she stared into his eyes and spoke her first words to him, a voice like steel wrapped in silk. "You have doomed yourself." Confused, Marcus led her away from the crowd through winding alleys and narrow passages until they reached the docking bay where his ship waited. She walked beside him without stumbling, the iron cuffs still hanging from her wrists. Her presence felt like a storm contained within a fragile body. He asked her name, and she gave it softly, Alara. Then she told him the truth: he had not bought a slave. He had stolen a prize from hunters who would never rest until they had her back. The chains had been more than restraints. They had been a mark, and by breaking them he had taken that mark upon himself. Marcus tried to laugh it off, telling her that hunters and empires had never scared him before, but the look in her eyes cut his words short. She spoke again, her voice colder. "Now, you do not understand. They will not stop. They will burn every port, every refuge until you are ash. They will not forgive you for this kindness. You think you freed me, but you only chained yourself to my fate." The human stared at her as the engines of his ship roared to life. Outside the bay around them, voices echoed of guards searching for him, and already the danger she warned of seemed to press closer still. Marcus felt no regret. Something about her strength, hidden beneath the sorrow in her gaze, stirred a fire in him that no warning could quench. He told her that if doom was the price of freedom, then he would pay it gladly, and that she was no longer alone. Alara said nothing for a long moment, only turned her eyes away as if holding back a storm of emotions. The ship's ramp lowered and Marcus guided her aboard, but even as the hatch sealed behind them, her warning still lingered in the air, a weight heavier than the chains she had worn in that moment. Marcus realized that the decision he made at the auction had set them both on a path with no return ahead. Lay pursuit, betrayal, and blood, yet he felt a strange certainty he had never known before. Whatever hunted her would find not just a fugitive, but a human, unwilling to bow. Thus began their flight into the shadows, a journey born not of chance but of choice. Her chains broken, his fate sealed, and the galaxy stirred awake to the echo of one human's defiance. The ship broke free of the outpost atmosphere and entered the dark sea of stars. Marcus guided the vessel with practiced ease, his hands steady on the controls. Though his mind churned with questions, Alara sat in the co-pilot seat, her wrists still raw from the chains, her gaze fixed on the void beyond the glass. He asked her again what she meant when she said he had doomed himself. She did not answer at first, her silence heavy as if she wrestled with whether to trust him. Then slowly she began to speak, her words weaving a story older than Marcus had expected. She told him she was not just any slave. She was a fugitive, once a daughter of a highborn line in the Kalith Empire, a realm known for its ruthless expansion and its hunger for control. Her family had been hunted and executed for daring to resist their Rules she had escaped only by chance, but her blood carried something the Empire could not allow to vanish within. Her was a key. A genetic marker tied to ancient technologies older than the Empire itself. She said that her existence was not simply a matter of pride or rebellion. It was a threat to the Empire's dominion, and for that reason they had marked her as prey forever. Marcus listened as the stars drifted past the ship like endless, watchful eyes. He asked why she had been on that outpost, how she had ended in chains. She admitted that she had been betrayed by someone she once called ally sold to slavers, who knew the Empire would pay handsomely for her return. Her tone was bitter, but her eyes burned with shame when Marcus asked why she had warned him instead of begging for freedom. She turned sharply to him and said, "Because you do not understand what they will send against us. I was already hunted, but you have made yourself their enemy, too." Even as she spoke, the ship's sensors chirped. Marcus leaned forward. Scanning the display, a small fleet of pursuit craft had slipped into their trail, their engines glowing hot against the cold stars. Ilara saw the screen and her face hardened. She told him to set a course for the shadow. Lanes hidden routes through dead systems where Imperial scanners would have difficulty finding them. Marcus obeyed, though unease gnawed at him. He was a wanderer, not a warrior, yet he felt the hunt tightening around them. The first shot struck the shield, a tremor that shook the cabin. Marcus swore under his breath and pushed the engines harder, weaving the ship through the asteroid field that loomed ahead. Ilara gripped the seat, her voice calm despite the chaos, telling him when to turn, when to dive. Her knowledge of these lanes was sharper than his own. Together they guided the vessel through jagged stone and tumbling rock until the hunters were forced to slow, unable to match their reckless path. The ship broke free into quiet space, battered but alive. In the silence that followed, Marcus looked at Ilara with new respect. She was not helpless. She was not a burden. In truth, she had saved them as much as he had her. She noticed his stare and met it with a steady gaze. Her words soft, but unwavering. "I told you that you cannot walk away from this even now. You could leave me on some forgotten moon and hope they never find you. But if you stay, then every star you visit, every friend you trust, will be in danger." Marcus felt the weight of her warning, but deep inside he already knew his answer. He told her plainly that he had made his choice when he broke her chains and he would not undo it. Ilara did not argue. Instead, she leaned back, her expression unreadable. But for the first time there was no coldness in her voice when she whispered, "Then you must be ready, Marcus. You must be ready for the hunt, because they will come, and they will not stop until one of us is gone." As the ship sailed deeper into the shadowed lanes, Marcus felt the truth of her words sink into his bones, yet instead of fear, he felt something else stirring, a fire that matched the defiance in her eyes. The galaxy had marked them as prey. But in that moment, Marcus began to wonder if the hunters truly knew what they had unleashed. The ship drifted into the safety of the shadow lanes where the stars seemed dimmer, and the echoes of distant battles whispered through the void. Marcus rested his hands on the controls, but his mind was restless. Ilara sat beside him, her eyes closed as if she could feel the invisible threads of danger tightening around them. He wanted to believe that their escape from the hunters meant a reprieve, yet deep inside he knew it was only the beginning. Their pursuers would not stop until they had claimed her and destroyed him. When Ilara opened her eyes, she spoke with a tone that carried both sorrow and strength. She told Marcus that the Empire had marked her since birth, not because of who she was, but because of what she carried within her veins long ago. Her ancestors had been chosen as stewards of an ancient secret, a relic of power created in an age before the Empire existed. She explained that her bloodline contained the genetic key to awaken weapons, older than most civilizations, weapons so devastating they could silence entire fleets with a whisper. Her captors had wanted to deliver her back to the Empire, because whoever controlled her blood could command those forgotten horrors. Marcus listened, his jaw tight, his mind racing with questions. He asked why she had not destroyed this secret or hidden herself away forever. Ilara answered with quiet bitterness. She had tried to vanish, moving from world to world, never staying long enough to leave. A trace but betrayal had followed her every step. Even those who promised friendship eventually saw her not as a person, but as a prize, She had once believed freedom was possible, but chains had proven her wrong until the day Marcus appeared and broke them. The human thought of the auction, how her eyes had burned with defiance even in shackles, and he understood something. Then she was not just running from hunters, she was running from a destiny, carved into her very blood, one she had never asked for yet could not escape. He told her that if her blood held such power, then the Empire feared her for good reason, perhaps too much reason, and if they feared her, then maybe that fear could be turned against them. Before she could answer, alarms cut through the cabin, the sensors lit up with signals. Enemy craft were converging again, faster this time, sharper, their engines tuned for the kill. Marcus cursed under his breath, pushing the ship into a desperate climb. Ilara braced herself, but her voice remained steady, telling him where the blind spots of the scanners were, how to twist through the lanes where shadows swallowed even the brightest glow. Yet no matter how hard he pushed, the hunters closed in. One ship broke through their path, weapons charging. Marcus spun hard. The ship groaned under the strain, but his reflexes carried them just clear of the burning blast. He fired back, and for a moment the dark was lit by flame. The enemy vessel broke apart, scattering into silent wreckage. Ilara turned to him, her expression unreadable, but he could see the storm behind her calm mask. "You cannot keep this pace forever," she said, "and you cannot fight them alone." After the battle, the ship limped forward, shields strained, engines overheating. Marcus set them into a drift among a field of broken asteroids. There in the silence, Ilara finally revealed more. She admitted that the Empire would never stop, because the key within her was not just a weapon. It was also a symbol. If the wrong hands claimed her, it would mean the end of any resistance across the galaxy. She told Marcus that his choice to free her had tied him to a war older than both of them, a war between control and freedom. Marcus felt the weight of her confession. Yet instead of fear, he felt clarity. He told her that he did not regret his choice and would never abandon her. She studied him closely, her silver eyes gleaming in the faint light, and for the first time her lips curved into the shadow of a smile, not of joy but of respect, as though she had found in him something she thought had been lost long ago. As the ship drifted silently through the ancient debris fields, Marcus realized the truth of her warning. He was hunted not just for freeing a fugitive, but for holding a secret that could change the fate of the stars. He did not know if he could survive what was coming, but he knew one thing with unshakable certainty: he would not let her be taken again. The hunters thought they had cornered prey, but Marcus felt a fire inside that told him the hunt was about to change. The broken asteroid field gave them a temporary refuge, but Marcus knew it was not safety. The ship's engines hissed with strain, and the shields flickered as though weary from the chase. He worked in silence, patching systems with tools pulled from worn lockers, his movements practiced but edged with frustration. Ilara moved beside him with a grace that seemed strange after the chains. She had worn her hands quick as she helped him fit damaged conduits into place. Though she had never worked with human technology before, she seemed to learn faster than he expected. When the repairs were complete, they both sat in the dim glow of the cabin, the silence heavy between them. Marcus finally broke it, asking her why she had trusted him in the asteroid field when she had given him directions that saved them. Ilara's eyes were steady as she answered. She told him it was not trust, it was necessity. Yet her tone carried something softer beneath it. She admitted that she had expected him to abandon her after hearing the truth of what hunted her most, had done so before the weight was too much to bear. But Marcus had not turned away. Instead, he had chosen to fight, and that choice had unsettled her more than chains ever had. The moment between them was interrupted by a warning light. The long-range scanner detected a signal, not Imperial, not Hunter, but something else. Marcus frowned and adjusted the display. It was a beacon, one he recognized from his past. It marked an outpost once held by human traders, now fallen into disuse. Or so he believed. Ilara leaned closer, studying the signal, and insisted they approach. She said that any hidden corner of the galaxy might offer answers. Marcus was wary, but his instincts told him that avoiding the beacon would only lead to more running, so he set their course. The outpost appeared out of the shadows, a cluster of broken towers circling a fading star. Its walls scarred by old battles, Marcus guided the ship into a docking bay where silence hung like a tomb. But as the ramp lowered and they stepped into the hollow halls, the silence broke with the sound of voices. Marcus stiffened his hand, drifting toward the pistol at his belt before he could draw it. A figure emerged from the shadows, an old companion from his wandering days, a smuggler named Reinat. First there was warmth in the reunion. Rin greeted Marcus with rough laughter, clapping his shoulder, speaking of old jobs and narrow escapes. Marcus almost allowed himself to relax, but Alara stood rigid, her eyes sharp as if she sensed something deeper. She whispered to Marcus that she did not trust this man, but Marcus brushed it aside, telling her that Rin had once saved his life and would not betray him. They followed Rin into a hidden chamber where food and supplies waited, but Alara's gaze never left their host. It was not long before her instincts proved true as Marcus reached for a cup offered by Rin. Alara struck it from his hand, the liquid splashing across the floor, her voice like ice telling him it was poisoned. Rin's smile faded, replaced by a cold expression as hidden doors opened and armed hunters stepped into the room. The smuggler revealed his betrayal with little shame. The Empire had offered him more than Marcus's friendship could ever match, and he had delivered them both into the trap. The battle that followed was brutal. Marcus drew his pistol, firing with deadly precision, while Alara fought with nothing but her chains still wrapped around her wrists turned into weapons of steel. The hunters fell one by one, but the numbers pressed hard. Marcus took a blow to the side, the pain blinding. Yet he fought on. Alara moved with a fury that startled him, her strikes fueled by years of rage and the will to never be caged again. When the last of the hunters lay broken, Rin attempted to flee, but Alara caught him, her eyes blazing with a wrath that made Marcus pause. She raised the chain as if to end him, but Marcus called out, his voice steady, despite his pain, telling her that killing him would change nothing. The betrayal had already been done and more hunters would come. Alara froze for a long moment before lowering the chain, though her eyes still burned with fury. She turned to Marcus, her words sharp as blades. "I warned you," she said, "and now you see what it costs to stand with me." Marcus felt the weight of her words as he staggered from the wound, but he did not regret his choice. Even in betrayal, even in pain, he knew that abandoning her would have been the true poison. They left the outpost behind its halls, filled with ghosts both old and new. As the ship rose back into the stars, Marcus felt her presence beside him, stronger than before, bound not by chains, but by the fire of survival, and the promise that neither of them could turn back now. The stars stretched endlessly before them as the ship limped away from the treacherous outpost. Marcus tightened the bandage across his side, wincing at the sting, while Alara guided the ship through the desolate lanes, her movements steady, though her expression carried the weight of unspoken thoughts. The betrayal had left a scar not only on Marcus's body, but on the fragile bond of trust that held them together. Still, there was no time to dwell on wounds. The Empire's shadow pressed closer with every passing hour, and they both knew another refuge would be needed. Alara spoke of a place forgotten by most maps, a hidden fortress built long ago during the first human expeditions beyond their cradle world. She claimed it had been whispered of even among her people, a place where humans tested machines and weapons left to rust when the frontier closed. Marcus raised a brow at her certainty, but the coordinates she offered aligned with faint markings on his own ancient charts. Perhaps chance, or perhaps fate guided them there. He set the course, and the ship plunged deeper into the forgotten reaches of space days, past intense silence broken only by the hum of the engines. Marcus spent the time repairing systems while Alara walked the narrow halls, studying the ship as though it carried answers to questions she had never dared to ask. Sometimes Marcus caught her staring at the symbols etched into old control panels, relics of a time when humanity had still been young. Among the stars, her eyes lingered on them with a strange mixture of awe and fear. When they finally reached the dead system, the sight before them stole Marcus's breath. Orbiting a barren world stood a vast structure, its towers broken, its defenses dormant, a fortress wrapped in the silence of centuries. The ship approached cautiously, but no weapon stirred. No signals flared. It was as if the place had been waiting. Marcus guided them through a shattered docking ring, and the ramp lowered into halls of dust and shadow. Inside the fortress, the air carried the weight of memory. Marcus's boots echoed on steel floors as he lit the path ahead. Ilara followed close, her silver eyes wide with wonder. They passed through chambers filled with forgotten machines, consoles long dark, and walls lined with banners bearing symbols of humanity's earliest fleets. Here Marcus felt something stir within him, a sense that this was not just a ruin, but a reminder of what his people had once been. In the heart of the fortress they found a chamber still alive, faint lights flickering as ancient systems recognized the presence of a human. Marcus placed his hand against a console, and the room awoke with a low hum. Holographic displays bloomed too. Life-revealing maps of old wars and designs of weapons lost to time. Ilara stepped forward, her face pale as she recognized symbols woven into the designs. They matched the markings of her bloodline. She turned to Marcus, her voice unsteady as she explained that her people had not been the first to guard the genetic key. The humans had touched it long before the Empire rose. It was humanity that had first bound the secret into her ancestors, weaving it into their blood as both curse and protection. Marcus felt the weight of the revelation crash over him. The Empire hunted her because of a legacy his own kind had created. Ilara's voice broke as she spoke of her family, slaughtered because of a burden, not of their making. Marcus reached for her hand and she did not pull away. He told her that this fortress and these machines proved something vital. The Empire feared not just her bloodline, but the memory of what humans once wielded together. They carried a legacy stronger than chains and dead empires. They spent hours exploring the fortress, uncovering weapons sealed away in vaults and armor, left untouched by centuries. Marcus repaired what he could, his hands guided by instinct, while Ilara watched, learning with silent determination. She was no longer the chained fugitive he had freed, but a warrior preparing to rise from the ashes of her people as they prepared to leave. Marcus knew that the hunters would come soon, drawn by whispers of movement in a system thought lifeless. But this time he no longer felt they were running. He looked at Ilara and saw not a fugitive but a partner bound to him by fate. Her voice was calm when she said the hunters would soon regret ever calling them prey. The fortress had given them more than shelter. It had given them a reason to fight back. When they lifted off from the ruined stronghold, Marcus felt the weight of destiny pressing down on him. Yet for the first time, it did not feel like a chain. It felt like a weapon, and he was ready to wield it. The fortress fell away into the void as the ship soared once more into the open stars, yet something fundamental had shifted. Marcus felt it in the way his hand steadied on the controls, and in the way Ilara moved with a fire in her step. They were no longer fugitives scrambling from shadow to shadow. They were hunters preparing to strike. The relics and schematics drawn from the fortress had armed them with more than weapons. They had been given knowledge, and Marcus knew that knowledge in the hands of a determined human was the most dangerous tool of all. They tested the ancient systems as they drifted through empty sectors. The ship now carried new power, woven from both human ingenuity and Ilara's guidance. Marcus had repaired old defense turrets and mounted them across the hull. Ilara had studied the fortress records and found codes hidden in the architecture that allowed them to disrupt Imperial tracking beacons together. They transformed the battered vessel into something sharper, leaner, no longer prey, but something predators should fear. The first chance to test their strength came swiftly. A squadron of hunters cornered them at the edge of a nebula. Marcus could see their ships glimmering like cold knives against the clouds of gas. Once those ships would have forced him to flee, but now he pushed the engines forward straight into the fight. Ilara stood at his side, her hands guiding the new systems. The hunters opened fire, but their blasts splintered against freshly restored shields. Marcus returned fire, and for the first time the hunters faltered one by one. Their vessels fell burning into the nebula until only silence remained. Ilara looked at Marcus with eyes wide, not from fear, but from something close to pride. She whispered that they had turned the tide. Marcus grinned, though his side still ached from old wounds. The battle had proved what he had begun to believe: the hunters could bleed, and when they bled, the Empire would begin to fear. Their victories grew with each encounter. Whispers spread through trade lanes of a human ship that struck like a blade in the dark. Slavers vanished. Outposts loyal to the Empire fell silent. Marcus and Ilara became a name spoken, With both hope and dread, rebels cheered when they heard of them while loyalists trembled. Marcus saw how quickly the story grew beyond them. Yet he accepted it because every frightened whisper kept the hunters from closing their jaws tighter. But the Empire was not blind. It gathered fleets larger than Marcus had ever seen, forcing him and Alara to strike harder, to vanish faster. The closer they drew to the heart of Imperial space, the more dangerous each battle became. Still, Marcus refused to yield. He told Alara that running forever was no life worth living. They had to fight not as prey, but as defiance itself. In those moments between battles when silence returned, Marcus and Alara spoke not of war, but of each other. She told him fragments of her childhood before the Empire burned her family from the stars of the songs her mother sang, and the hidden gardens she had played in. He shared stories of Earth, long forgotten in these distant reaches, tales of oceans that stretched farther than the eye could see, and mountains that rose like titans into the clouds. Sometimes their laughter filled the cabin, and for a while, the galaxy and its dangers seemed far away. Yet the storm always returned. The Empire unleashed warbands greater than before, entire fleets tasked to end the human and the fugitive woman. Marcus and Alara met them not with fear, but with precision. Their ambushes turned predators into prey. Their victories echoed like thunder across systems long chained. Still, Alara reminded him that their fight was only beginning. She told him that the Empire would not rest until it crushed them, or until its people began to see the weakness behind its mask. Marcus listened and nodded, but deep inside he carried no illusions. He knew that their war was one they might not survive. Yet as he looked at Alara, her silver eyes glowing with defiance, he felt a strange calm. She had once warned him that by freeing her he had doomed himself, but now he believed that doom had become destiny. Together they stood in the cabin of their ship as the stars wheeled past. Alara laid her hand over his and told him quietly that the hunters had become desperate, and desperate enemies made mistakes. Marcus met her gaze and answered that, when the final mistake came, they would be ready. The Empire had begun this hunt, but it would not be the Empire that decided how it ended. The final act of their long flight came as the ship dropped from the shadow lanes into a sector burning with light. Ahead stretched the full force of the Caliph Empire, a fleet so vast it seemed to swallow the stars. Marcus stood at the controls, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on the impossible sight, while Alara moved beside him, her hands tightening on the console. She had always told him this moment would come, and now there was no escape. The Empire had gathered every hunter, every warship, every ounce of fear it could muster to bring down one human, and the woman he had freed. The calm crackled with the voice of an Imperial commander, sharp and cold, demanding Alara's surrender and promising swift death if Marcus resisted. Marcus did not bother to reply. His answer came in the roar of the engines as he steered their ship straight into the teeth of the fleet. Alara began activating the codes they had drawn from the fortress, ancient signals that pulsed through the void like thunder. The enemy's sensors wavered, entire wings of ships faltered, their formations thrown into chaos. Kuas seized the moment, diving into the storm of fire. The battle raged across the stars, their small ship weaving like a shadow between giants. The hunters struck hard, but Marcus struck harder, his reflexes sharpened by every desperate escape, and Alara's guidance matched his every move. The weapons they had restored from the fortress cut through enemy armor like blades of light one by one. Imperial ships burned their wreckage, scattering across the void. Yet for every vessel that fell, a dozen more closed in, surrounding them with the weight of inevitability. Then the unexpected happened. Alara raised her voice over the alarms, speaking words Marcus had never heard before. A chant carried in her blood. Her presence lit the controls with a glow that pulsed through her veins. The genetic key inside her unlocked, and the fortress codes awakened in full. The stars themselves seemed to tremble as ancient weapons hidden in forgotten vaults across the galaxy stirred to life. Beams of raw energy erupted not from their ship alone, but from distant outposts long dead. Guided by the bond of her blood, the Empire had sought to control her. But instead she commanded what they feared most. The fleet reeled under the onslaught, their formations collapsing. Marcus guided the ship through the chaos as Alara's power spread like wildfire. Her voice steady, though her body shook under the strain. He called to her, telling her to hold on. but she only met his gaze and said, "This is why you freed me. This is what we were meant to do." The hunters had thought to chain her, yet now she stood unbound and unstoppable. Rebellion answered across the stars. Enslaved worlds rose at the sight of the Empire. Faltering messages of defiance poured through the comms. As one by one chains were broken, Marcus heard voices he had never met, crying out in unity, the legend of the human and the alien bride spreading like fire. The empire that had stretched for centuries began to fracture under the weight of its own fear, but victory demanded sacrifice. Their ship shuddered under the relentless fire of the remaining warships. Marcus fought to keep the hull together, while Ilara poured the last of her strength into the codes. At last, the Imperial flagship shattered, its destruction echoing like the fall of a giant. Silence followed, broken only by the hiss of dying flames across the void. The Empire's fleet scattered, beaten not by armies, but by two souls who had refused to bow. When it was over, Marcus pulled the ship into the quiet edges of the sector. The stars calm once more. Ilara slumped against him, her strength nearly gone, yet her eyes shone with something brighter than exhaustion. Pride, she whispered, that he had changed the fate of more than just her. He had changed the fate of countless worlds. Marcus held her close, his own voice rough, as he told her that freedom had been worth every scar. In the days that followed, news spread faster than light. Rebellions bloomed, empires crumbled, and the story of the human who freed the alien bride became legend. Marcus and Ilara did not linger to bask in it. They vanished into the shadows of the galaxy together, no longer fugitives, but symbols of what it meant to rise against chains wherever chains existed. Whispers of their deeds grew into songs sung by those who had once known only silence. Ilara had once warned Marcus that freeing her would doom him, yet, as they stood together gazing at the stars, they both knew the truth. He had not been doomed, he had been chosen. And together they had transformed doom into destiny, and destiny into freedom. The stars were quiet after the storm of battle. The silence almost too vast to believe. Marcus sat at the helm, his body aching from wounds old and new, but his spirit burning brighter than ever beside him. Ilara leaned against the console, her silver eyes half closed, her breath shallow, yet filled with peace. They had survived what none believed possible, and in doing so they had ignited something far greater than themselves. All across the galaxy, signals of rebellion carried through the void. Chains were shattered. Slave markets, emptied soldiers once sworn to the Empire, turned their weapons against their masters. Marcus and Ilara listened to fragments of transmissions, voices speaking their names as symbols of defiance, not as fugitives, but as legends. The human who had chosen to break the chains, and the alien bride who carried the power of forgotten ages together. They had torn apart the illusion of the Empire's invincibility. Marcus looked at Ilara and remembered the first moment he had seen her on the auction block, bound in iron, yet burning with fire. He remembered her first words, telling him he was doomed, and he smiled at the irony. For doom had led them here to a freedom neither of them had imagined. She opened her eyes and saw his smile, and for the first time since he had known her, she smiled back, not with bitterness or sorrow, but with quiet certainty. The galaxy was changing, but for Marcus and Ilara the path ahead was their own. They had no throne to claim, no empire to build, only the vast sea of stars and the bond forged in chains and battle. Marcus asked her where she wished to go now, free of pursuit. Her voice, soft yet unwavering, answered, "Anywhere, as long as you walk beside me." He guided the ship into the endless dark, the engines humming like a heartbeat, the universe wide open before them. Behind lay the ashes of an empire, ahead lay worlds unbound and stories yet to be written. They were no longer prey, no longer fugitives. They were wanderers, warriors, and a promise that freedom once claimed could never be caged again. And so the human who defied, hunters and the alien bride who carried the key to ancient power, vanished into the stars, leaving only their legend behind, a legend that would be remembered in every corner of the galaxy where hope had once been lost. The end.